Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Some questions echo through decades, through generations, through the dreams of those who dare to ask them. And some children simply vanish. Not into thin air, not without reason, but into something far darker. Something that the authorities didn't want to investigate. Something that a grieving family spent their entire lives trying to uncover. This is not a ghost story. This is not fiction. This is the true story of the Sodder children. And it is one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in the history of the United States. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in the small mountain town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Second World War had just ended. Soldiers were coming home. Families were reuniting, and across America, people were finally breathing again, finally allowing themselves to feel joy, warmth, and hope after years of darkness. The Sodder family had every reason to celebrate. George Sodder was a hard-working Italian immigrant who had built a good life in America. He owned a trucking business. He had a warm home, and most importantly, he had a large, loving family. George and his wife Jenny had 10 children together. 10. Their home was loud and chaotic and full of life in the best possible way. That Christmas Eve, 9 of the 10 children were home. The eldest, John, was away serving in the military. The younger children, Maurice, who was 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and little Betty, who was just 5 years old. They were too excited to sleep. They begged their parents to let them stay up late. They wanted to play with their Christmas toys just a little longer. They wanted to enjoy the magic of Christmas Eve just a little more. George smiled and told them to go to bed. He and Jenny would be right behind them. That was the last normal moment the Sodder family would ever have. Around midnight, Jenny Sodder was pulled from sleep by a strange sound. A loud, heavy thud on the roof above her. She lay still in the darkness, listening. The house was quiet. The children were asleep. George was breathing beside her. She convinced herself it was nothing. Perhaps a branch. Perhaps an animal. Perhaps just the old house settling in the winter cold. She closed her eyes. She drifted back to sleep. She would spend the rest of her life wishing she hadn't. At exactly 1 o'clock in the morning, the Sodder house was on fire. Jenny's eyes flew open. The smell of smoke hit her first. Then the heat. Then the orange glow seeping under the bedroom door. She screamed. George was already moving. He threw open the door. The downstairs hallway was a wall of fire. The flames had spread fast, unnaturally fast, as if the house had been designed to burn. There was no time. There was no choice. George grabbed the children closest to him. Jenny grabbed the others. Together they burst through the front door and stumbled out into the freezing West Virginia night, gasping for clean air, barefoot in the snow. And then Jenny turned around. And she counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her face went white. The others, she screamed. George, the other 5. They're still inside. What happened in the next few minutes would haunt George Sodder for the rest of his life. He ran back toward the burning house. The heat was ferocious. The flames were consuming everything. But he had to try. Those were his children. He ran to the side of the house where he always kept his ladder. The ladder he used to access the upper floor windows. It was gone. Someone had removed it. George ran to his truck. If he could drive it close enough to the house, he could climb onto the roof and reach the upper windows. He turned the key. The engine was dead. This truck had worked perfectly that afternoon. George had driven it himself just hours before. Now, on this night, at this moment, it refused to start. He ran to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door, screaming for help. His neighbor tried to call the fire department. The phone line was dead. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, lived less than 2 miles away. He did not arrive for nearly 8 hours. 8 hours. By then, the house was nothing but ash and silence. And 5 children were gone. When investigators arrived the next morning, They sifted through the smoldering ruins looking for remains. They found almost nothing. No bones, no bodies, no clothing, no evidence whatsoever that 5 children had been inside that house when it burned. The official report was filed quickly. The fire was ruled accidental. An electrical fault, they said. The children perished in the fire, they said. Case closed. George and Jenny Sauter stood in the ruins of their home, in the ruins of their life, and they refused to accept it. Because the questions would not stop coming. Why was the ladder missing? Why did the truck fail to start on that specific night? Why were the phone lines dead? Why did the fire chief take 8 hours to arrive from 2 miles away? And most importantly, why were there no remains? Human bones do not simply disappear in a house fire. Even in crematoriums, which burn at far higher temperatures and for far longer periods, bone fragments always remain. Always. It is physically impossible for 5 human bodies to leave no trace whatsoever in a residential house fire. George Sauter knew this, and it told him one devastating thing. His children had not burned in that fire, which meant someone had taken them. George began to dig, not through rubble this time, but through memory, through the weeks and months before the fire, through conversations he had tried to forget, and things began to surface. Weeks before Christmas, a stranger had appeared at the Sauter home asking about work. George turned him away. As the man walked off the porch, he paused. He turned back. He looked directly at the fuse box mounted on the side of the house. And he said, calmly, almost pleasantly, "This is going to cause a fire someday." George had dismissed it at the time. A strange comment from a strange man. He didn't dismiss it anymore. There was something else. Something George had been turning over in his mind since the morning after the fire. George Sauter was a proud Italian immigrant, but he was not a quiet one. In the years leading up to the fire, he had spoken loudly and publicly about his contempt for Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator whose fascism had torn Europe apart. Not everyone in the Italian-American community appreciated his outspokenness. A man had come to George's door once, not asking for work, but delivering a message. He looked George in the eyes and told him that he would pay for the things he had said. George had not taken it seriously at the time. Now, standing in the ashes of his home, 5 children missing, he took it very seriously indeed. Then the sightings began. A woman staying at a hotel in Salesville, Ohio reported seeing 5 children who matched the descriptions of the missing Sauter children perfectly. They were with 2 adults she did not recognize. The children, she said, looked frightened. They looked like they wanted to speak to her but couldn't. By the time anyone investigated, they were gone. Over the following years, more sightings trickled in. Different states, different cities, always the same description. Always children who looked exactly like Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sauter. George and Jenny refused to give up. They hired private investigators. They followed every lead. They spent their own money, their own time, their own health chasing the truth. And they put up a billboard. On Route 16 in West Virginia, they erected a large sign with photographs of their 5 missing children. Beneath the photographs, the words were simple and desperate. Do you know what happened to them? That billboard stood for decades. Thousands of people drove past it. Very few stopped. In 1968, 23 years after the fire, Jenny Sauter walked to her mailbox and found an envelope. There was no return address. The postmark said Kentucky. Inside was a single photograph. It showed a young man, perhaps in his late 20s. Dark hair, strong features, something unmistakably familiar in the eyes and the shape of his face. Jenny turned the photograph over with trembling hands. On the back, someone had written in careful handwriting, "Louis Sauter, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys, a 90,132. Jenny collapsed. The young man in that photograph looked exactly like what her son Louis would have looked like as a grown man. The resemblance was undeniable. The message was specific, personal. It referenced family details that a stranger could not have simply guessed. Investigators traced the postmark. They followed every possible lead out of Kentucky. They found nothing. No sender, no address, no name, no answers. The letter and the photograph vanished into the case file, joining a pile of unanswered questions that grew taller every year. George Sauter died in 1968, the same year the mysterious letter arrived, without ever learning what happened to his children. Jenny lived on alone, keeping the search alive for another 21 years. She died in 1989. She never got her answer. To this day, the Sauter children case remains one of the most chilling and unresolved mysteries in American history. No confirmed remains were ever recovered. No one was ever arrested. No one was ever charged. No one was ever even seriously investigated. The missing ladder was never explained. The dead phone lines were never explained. The failed truck engine was never explained. The 8-hour delay of the fire chief was never explained. And the young man in the photograph, the one who looked so much like Louis Sauter, was never identified. 5 children went to bed on Christmas Eve, full of excitement and innocence, dreaming of Christmas morning. They never saw it. Somewhere between the flames and the dawn, between the ash and the silence, between a mother's scream and a father's desperate search, they simply disappeared. And the world, for the most part, let them. If you pass through Fayetteville, West Virginia, drive slowly down Route 16. Look for the place where a billboard once stood, and ask yourself the question that George and Jenny Sauter spent their entire lives asking. What really happened to the Sauter children?